And Kyla, it's so nice to have you here. Thank you for being here today. You've both worn many hats, from teacher to these leaders of really complex systems. And so to kick it off for everyone, I'd love if you could share, what continues to inspire your work and what keeps you connected to the why behind it. Erin, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, yes, thanks for having me. I think for myself, I've always really believed in education as really powerful for creating opportunity and access, for its ability to facilitate social justice, economic justice. And I've always believed that it should really be a quality education for all students. And what continues to drive me every day is working towards that goal. And now, I feel like we've got a lot of work to do, and so every day this work is continued as far as the drive to make sure all students have access to a high-quality educator and education that is, sees who the student is, supports them as individuals, supports their communities, and we have a lot to do, so that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I think for me, just the notion that what is still in 2025 the exception should be the norm, and that we want to normalize having a high-quality education and that every kid has the ability to live out their potential. To me, that's the driving force. I'm from East Oakland. I had the opportunity, after going to public school up until 8th grade, to be a part of an organization called A Better Chance, which helps kids of color get into independent schools, full scholarship. I went to the Branson School, which is in Ross, California, for those of you who are familiar with the Bay Area. Very different environment than Oakland, which allowed me to get a full scholarship to University of Pennsylvania. So I am a huge believer that, with opportunity, kids can live their wildest dreams, and we're still in the land of first, right? In so many places, and there's still so many exceptions instead of that being of course, right? Of course, we have diversity and many different kids who can be engineers and create their own businesses and all the things. And so that's my driving force. I think what I love about this conversation is I think in every single system, whether the system itself is failing, based on whatever key performance indicators, you can find an awesome teacher. You can find an awesome principal. You can find a school that's kicking ass. The issue is we can't point to one system, public, charter, independent. There's an achievement gap in independent schools where you can say, yes, every kid who might be first generation, Black, brown, immigrant, coming from another country, that there's no opportunity gap. To me, that's the driving force, is like, what's the calculus to figure out the system to make that true for every kid?
Thank you so much for that. And you each work in really different contexts in Oakland and in Massachusetts, but you have this shared vision for a commitment toward helping students get what they need to thrive. And I'd love if you could share a bit about your high-impact tutoring efforts and how that's been connected toward broader student goals, and what you've really built and scaled. So Kyla, let's start with you. Can you give us a little bit of context around Oakland, your school system, and how you've approached high-impact tutoring as part of broader vision for student success?
Yeah, we're scrappy, spicy, exciting districts without quotes, with quotes. And so really my approach, I'm really excited that we've actually finally exited state receivership, not only for financial reasons, but actually academic reasons. We've had oversight from the state for a long, long time because of underachievement. And so we've really just been focused on the importance of growth. There's so many kids. I think in California now we have about 68% of kids, right, non-Title I, right, that are reading at third grade level, 68%. When you account for kids that speak another language other than English, socioeconomics, it drops down to 27%. Like, that is staggering, right? That's where we are now in 2025 with all of the different philosophies around how to teach kids to read. I won't even go into math because then we'd have to double the number of days that we would be having this conversation. So this piece around like the system pieces, we had this wonderful report from this organization called Public Works. And what they really pointed out for our system was, hey, you guys went too far in the direction of decentralization. You're too decentralized. There's too much autonomy in your system, which means there's a lot of inconsistency in terms of curriculum, instructional approach, the assessments that are being used. So we really took to heart that report and really started thinking about like what's the system approach in terms of the importance of curriculum, instructional practices, assessments, and really thinking about tutoring as a part of a larger system and not just this awesome thing that's happened decoupled from what's happening with the classroom teacher and what's happening with the with parents, right, and them kind of knowing their role. It started off with an organization, a community-based organization, Oakland Reach, with a phenomenal CEO, Lakeisha Young, and we started doing tutoring actually during the pandemic. And she actually started working with a lot of our classified workers and just seeing for, I think Susanna was talking about it earlier. I'm a parent. That's what I did. I hired tutors. Actually, my daughter is dyslexic, and Iowa actually does a lot of work around dyslexia. So my daughter has a virtual tutor, just kind of personalized for what she needs. And, the cost of tutoring is astronomical. And I think after the pandemic, because it's a supply and demand issue, it can be anywhere from 100, 150, 200 if you're a physics tutor, if you're a computer science tutor. So it really became an issue, once again, of equity and access. And so with this partner that I had who was so just tied to parents and their needs and had such relationships that as a system, right, I could never have that depth of relationships. We partnered and started doing tutoring just out of necessity during the pandemic. Once the pandemic ended, we just kind of took a step back and started thinking about the system approach. This particular community-based organization actually built into their grant having an evaluation report from the Center on Reinventing Public Education. And that's kind of one of my points is that I think a lot of times as systems, we jump into ideas without really making sure like we have the backing. I feel very strongly that is where we need partners like Stanford and the research community. Because as my grandmother says, like nothing new is really new, right? It's not like the concept of tutoring is new. We had tutoring during the Obama administration, during that economic recovery. And so it's like, are we looking at lessons learned, what didn't work, so we're not making those same mistakes? So from those reports, we learned about the minimum number of hours you need for it to be effective, right? We learned about best practices around scheduling, right? We learned and we're still working on the right relationships between the tutor and the teacher, because if that's not there, you're not going to get it to scale. And so I feel strongly like having one partner being the research one, two, that you're picking a tutoring organization that understands they've got to be a part of the system, right? So you've got to have someone leading it that's going to pay attention to how do you build that relational trust between an outside partner, right, between the teacher, between the principal, and really thinking about the role of central office in terms of guidance. And then the bigger issue is just the financial piece and how do you make sure that you have the dollars in the long run.
Great, thanks so much. I love the point about relational trust and having those partnerships kind of fill those different needs. I wanted to ask a follow-up question because I know that Steph and Aisha Curry's foundation, Eat, Learn, Play, has also been, really integral in your journey, and they've made a $25 million investment. And you already mentioned Oakland Reach and how that really centered families in your work. So I'm just sort of curious, as you think about where things are now, like where are things going in terms of the work with Eat, Learn, Play and the work you're doing there?
Yeah, well, the Currys have been, they're the Currys. So, of course, when they show up at schools, it's like 20 minutes of screaming before you can get anything done, and the adults are worse than the kids. Selfies out, so that energy is wonderful. But I think what's been awesome about them is both of them have been like, look, we're not experts, right? We understand we have a platform. We have the ability to elevate this dilemma, which they have done. But they've also partnered with Stanford. They've partnered with Aspen and really have done their homework around, okay, if we're going to put in our own money and also use their platform to get others to donate as well, we want to make sure that we're doing something that's connected to research and evidence. So again, we've really tried to develop a system. One, I can't underscore enough the importance of tier 1 instruction. Tutoring is not going to supplement a high quality teacher using high quality curriculum with that personalized relationship with students. It is not a substitute. So it is an enhancement, particularly knowing that the achievement gap has worsened after the pandemic. And so we've really tried to be thinking about what's that tier 2, which is really more small group instruction tutoring. If you're thinking about a kid that might be anywhere from a half a year to a year behind, and then tier 3, which is a student that might be 2, 3, even 4 years behind in terms of that one-on-one tutoring, because there's an economic cost. I wish we all had the money, to be able to pay for every kid to have a tutor, but that's just not economically feasible. So really being able to think through the cost around, which kids are you really going to invest that one-on-one, tutoring, and that's really where the Currys have come in, because we just don't have the funds in California through our general fund, our supplemental, our concentration, our LCFF funding formula in California to subsidize that. So really having a systematic approach, because we can look in our data, we can know how many students that is, you can get down to, basically what is the cost per student, right? To be able to, this investment is going to take us all the way through 28, 29. So then it allows the system to kind of think about, look at the ROI, the return on investment, and plan early, before you get to 28, 29 in terms of how do we make sure we can continue to have the dollars to fund that.
That's great, thanks. I love that you can have that ability to think long term. So I want to move us to the other side of the country, to Massachusetts. And I know, Erin, that Massachusetts, you guys are in the news because it's really exciting that your governor has proposed $25 million for early literacy, high dosage tutoring to help 10,000 students. But you've been doing the work a long time. Yeah, let's clap for that. That's exciting. But that really is a result of all of the work that you've done previously, and that's built up to it. So can you just walk us through your journey? How has the state been thinking about tutoring, and where have you evolved to now?
Sure. So just to give a brief background on Massachusetts as a context. So we, in our public schools, serve nearly 1 million students across the Commonwealth, across around 400 districts, 400 local education agencies. And it's quite a broad and diverse setting of local education agencies, anywhere from our largest district being Boston to very small rural districts in the western part of the state, and kind of everything in between. Very, very incredibly wealthy communities, a lot of gateway cities that don't have a lot of the resources that Boston has access to. So there's a wide range of need in Boston. In Massachusetts, I live in Boston, but in Massachusetts, I think also what you hear a lot about Massachusetts is, kind of this narrative of being number one, scoring well on NAEP. What we understand really deeply at the state level is understanding that, we celebrate our educators and the work being done that put us number one on NAEP scores, but in the reality, if we disaggregate the data, we are number one for some. And we take that really seriously, and we, in all the work that we're doing, we disaggregate and look to see how can we really maintain and further our commitment to equity, and really making sure that the students and communities who need additional resources and supports are getting access to them. Regarding high dosage tutoring, we didn't really get into this space until the pandemic, and recognizing the learning loss that occurred as a result of it. So right away, it was very quick. Again, we all didn't really know what to do and how to do it well. So, but immediately with the federal funds through GEAR and then ESSER, we started to set up our high dosage tutoring program for across the state. So what that looked like for us is we were also at the state level, state agency level, really trying to ease the burden off of districts who we knew were dealing with so much during that time, and continue to do so. So we actually hold all the procurements for the tutoring providers. We do the vetting, we contract with them, We adjust the contracts as needed based upon what schools apply to us and ask for. We focused for early literacy on grades kindergarten through third grade, and for math, focusing specifically for grade 4 students and grade 8 students. And then schools who are interested in those tutoring services basically communicate with us at the department. We match them with the type of tutoring provider that they are looking for, whether it's in-person, virtual, that type of thing that fits within what they were looking to support their students. And so that's what we've continued to do. The sustainability question is ongoing work as funds have, as from the beginning, starting in 2021, getting more funds. Now, as we're seeing less funds, now with the ESSER cliff happening, we actually even had to send an email out to the districts receiving our early literacy tutoring to say, hey, there's just no more money for this. The money that we had for this is now gone, and we're not getting more. And in some ways, that email communication, which we didn't love sending, and they definitely didn't love receiving, got many people very upset. And it really activated a lot of local advocacy for the tutoring. We got some lovely emails back around the fact that we couldn't continue it. But then it also activated a lot of local, a lot of state reps, state senators to really say, hey, this is needed, our communities need it. The data show that students have not kind of made back those gains from before. You cannot take this away now. We need it more than ever. I think the other thing Kyla mentioned as well, which is the critical part of making sure you are collecting the data and seeing the actual demonstrated impact of the tutoring. So we have third-party research partners who we have contracted with, but also we've had other partners in the state do their own support their own research as well to really demonstrate the significant growth that students have as a result, direct result of receiving high-dosage tutoring. So the local advocacy, along with the very clear data on outcomes, is really what allowed us to kind of build that groundswell of support for tutoring, such that with our some additional money that the state has access to through a recently passed Fair Share Act, the governor put into that a proposed $25 million for this upcoming fiscal year budget that would go specifically towards high-dosage tutoring, recognizing that it's a need, it's continued, and she feels a commitment to continue that support in our state.
Thanks. I love hearing about that journey and how you say it's this advocacy from the districts who really saw something that they loved and they said, hey, you can't take this away. And that led to this ability to be able to put forward that budget proposals. I think that's great, coupled with having that data. I wanted to follow up on something, Erin. When we were talking earlier, we were talking about scarcity of resources, and everybody is feeling that in some way, shape, or form. But you said something that I really liked, which was that scarcity led to a precision. So could you just tell us a little bit more about that and how your view has evolved with the high impact tutoring?
Sure. So when the money was good, we really had it quite open. We said, hey, kindergarten for example, for early literacy, it was kindergarten through third grade. Everyone needs it. So anyone who wants it and is willing to kind of work within our expectations and contracts, we're welcome to apply and get some of that tutoring. Along with the research that we have been doing with a partner to, one, constantly just make sure that all the vendors we are working with are showing impact. What we also started to track along the way is just seeing the amount of growth that we were seeing per kindergartners, first graders, second graders, third graders, and to the extent that we've continued to track it, the extent to which some of those gains have been sustained for students. So what we saw is that the largest growth was happening with students when they were receiving tutoring in kindergarten and first grade. We did see growth in second grade and third grade, but it was significantly a smaller group of students that were able to make those that amount of growth. And so when we had to force to really think about more precisely an investment decision, where can we invest and get the biggest bang for our buck, per se, it's looking at that kindergarten and first grade age. And so with this $25 million proposal, although it says it can be used for kindergarten through third grade, it's prioritizing first grade as a critical year in which students who are not yet demonstrating being on track to be proficient in reading, that those students at that critical time in their education, they are prioritized in getting access to this tutoring because we see such an impact with it. So with the kind of the scarcity, it really forces us to really think really thoughtfully around where we precisely can make investments that are going to really pay off long term.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. So, we've heard how in each of your contexts, you've been doing this for a while, and there is this evolution, and you've been able to scale. And so I'd love if you could just share maybe some key lessons about scaling high-impact tutoring programs that you think others in the room might find useful, ways to avoid common pitfalls, or things you wish you had known. So maybe we could start with Kyla.
Yeah, so in our district, we've had this mission of being a community school and a theory of change around the importance of public-private partnerships. So the Eat, Learn, Play is one. I've done some some math tutoring through I think now we're in the 11th year partnership with Salesforce, specifically just around middle schools. And one thing that I've learned around having partnerships at scale is it is a mindset as a leader to partner with an outside organization. And I think as the CEO of the organization, whether it's a school, a district, a state, really understanding what are those leadership skills and how you partner with an outside organization so there is healthy conflict, right, between the system and outside. And what I mean by that is we're not knocking it out of the park in public education, right, in our country. And so people have to be able to hear feedback, right, and not take it ain't personal, right? We're here for kids to learn. And so really being able to create a table where people who, may have been working in your system for 10, 15, 20 years, they're committed, right? And no one likes to hear things aren't as well as they should be. So how do you create the culture for people to be able to hear constructive criticism so that there's enough agitation to get the level of acceleration that we need as a student? I think when I first started in this role, I just underestimated, but they want to help us, right? And this level of subtle pushback and bureaucracy around, no, we got it. No, actually, we don't. You need to sit down. We need to listen. So a lot of that was around thinking differently about protocols, inquiry questions, and really getting people to be, it's okay that, we don't know everything. It's okay that we don't have the capacity to solve all of these things. Because without that, what I found is the partnership was stopping at me or my cabinet, but it's the middle management and systems. Those are the folks that are doing the work. So now we have structures. I'm not in the meetings with the literacy teams. That's my chief academic officer and her directors. They're the ones meeting with the folks with Eat, Learn, Play, having progress monitoring meetings to talk through how's the implementation going. It's meeting, I believe the other piece with partners is we're the technical, like we nerd out on this stuff or else you guys wouldn't be here. But like your average citizen who's just as worried about the literacy problem, that's where stories come in. And that's where, I don't have the money in my budget. I can't justify spending taxpayers' dollars to have a $2 million communication when my teachers still aren't paid $200,000, which I think is what a teacher should be paid. So, but I can leverage a partner. I can leverage Sydney and Eat, Learn, Play, who does all this amazing social media that's really highlighted for people who aren't paying attention to. Yeah, of course, every kid should have a tutor. My kid has 6 tutors, right? And so that's actually helped to bring more money. That's actually helped to get the attention of policymakers, right? So that if I do need to go and do some advocacy in Sacramento, right, there are these stories, because we're all connected more to the emotion of an issue sometimes, then the data comes next. And so that's another thing that I've learned that partners can do for us. And I think the third thing is have conversations in the community in ways that I can't, right? When Aisha Curry and Steph Curry show up with their literacy buses with parents and they have books that look like the community, right? That hits differently than, me showing up or someone else from the district. So I think really learning the strengths of what partners, folks outside of your organization can do, the strengths of what people inside of the organization can do, and developing systems around communication, around having conversations that get at trying to get high quality implementation. I think the evaluation piece is key, key, key. None of this needs to start from scratch. There's so many, little bright spots or people who've done this before, and, tons of research to say, yeah, if we could have done it again, we would have thought about these pieces. And I totally agree that there's a bright spot when money gets tight, because it really does force you to think about, what is the data telling you, right? And you can't fix everything at once, right? So where are we going to start? And that's been our experience with our data too. We've been able to get a little above 80% of our kindergartners who were leaving kindergartners on grade level. But with my former mayor, Libby Shaft, we really worked, and now we have a county, we have a parcel tax, so we can expand early learning. Because what we really saw from the data is, okay, if kindergartners are coming in already behind, I could track how that was attributing to disproportionality in special education, right? You could really track, because you had kids that didn't know their letters, you could track kids that were getting ready to have, a speech therapist and be referred for an IEP because they weren't getting what they needed in kindergarten. It really needed to start as a 3-year-old and as a 4-year-old, because we're not Ireland. We're not a country where there's high quality early education for all kids. So it just makes the job that much harder in kindergarten, because you're already playing catch up. So the data and really understanding what does that mean at a systems level to make the best decisions that you can as a board in terms of how you're spending your dollars. And then I think as a district leader, to be able to have evidence-based advocacy conversations at the state level to be able to change some of the policies.
Thanks so much. I love that. There's so many nuggets in there. I think a couple of things I'm taking away and really like are that humility, right, to be able to, be able to have those difficult conversations, and also being able to put people in the right roles. I think that stuck out to me as you were talking, among other things. And Erin, I'd love to turn it to you. So what are some key lessons you've learned about scaling high-impact tutoring? What are some lessons that you might have for those in the room?
I think there's a couple lessons we've really come to learn from and embed into our future design of our tutoring support. One is just around really prioritizing that coherence from the student's experience and from their learning experience, that they feel like the tutoring is coherent as far as what they are learning and how they are learning within their educational experience. I think, again, that very first year when we did it, and it was kind of like, hey, whoever needs it, come one, come all. And now what we're realizing is we don't want tutoring to become a fix for poor Tier 1 instruction. It's like, oh, well, we're not going to focus on Tier 1 instruction and that's fine because we're going to have tutoring. And tutoring will make sure kids are staying on track for reading success. So what we are really trying to hold ourselves to is that expectation of actually, like, tutoring is a great, really effective support, but you must have a strong Tier 1 in place that is giving everyone that strong initial foundation for all students. So as from the state level, as far as who we are prioritizing providing that additional support for, are schools and districts who have demonstrated that they have done the work around having a high-quality Tier 1 experience for their students, that they have high-quality instructional materials in place, that they are supporting their educators with high-quality professional learning. If those, and that they have built out a tiered system of support, and if they have those things and have been investing in that work, then we feel good at the state level of providing additional funding and opportunities to be able to access the tutoring, so that tutoring is really building off of that strong foundation that the school and district has been building, as opposed to being kind of a Band-Aid for doing that kind of bigger, more structural, important work. So that's one thing that we are focusing on and honing in on. I think the other thing which we continue to learn and get better at is really just tracking the things that we know make the tutoring successful. So we know students showing up for their tutoring and having consistent tutors. We know that makes the tutoring more effective than just having a tutor in a building. And so we have started tracking that very closely. Are the students showing up? How often are they showing up? Are they getting access to the same tutor? And really holding schools and districts accountable for making sure that that piece is happening. Otherwise, it is money that is just from like what's coming from the state or from the district. We don't want that money just wasted. We want it to actually be going in service of the students. So we're getting much tighter on tracking the things that we know are what results in the outcomes we want to see.
I like that. It goes back to the precision piece too. So I could ask you so many more questions, and I'd love to, but I know that many of you in the room probably have a bunch of questions that you'd like to ask Kyla and Erin. So we've got some mic runners, and so if you have a question, please raise your hand. Great.
Hi, thank you for the very insightful dialogue, and I love the increase in precision that both the market forces are pushing towards and your leadership is also pushing us towards. I'm a technology person who's very passionate about using technology to advance tutoring, and I'm curious about your perspectives on what could technology do, be it on the management side for getting the attendance and everything else to AI tutors to anything else. Like, where could the technology leaders, fellow leaders in this room, myself, what could we do to make your life easier and better so that you can deliver even more magical impact?
That's a great question. And I think there's so much opportunity for technology and particularly artificial intelligence for many different things. So one, I think in terms of at a system level, being able to pay attention to the right key performance indicators, and I'm glad that you brought up attendance, because there's ways of like looking at, okay, we've had 100 kids that have had this tutoring and 30 kids that hasn't made any difference, and really being able, instead of your humans, instead of your research department having to spend hours by hand doing that level of analysis, to be able to leverage technology right within seconds to say, oh my gosh, we actually haven't been looking at the attendance. Maybe that should be the criteria. Maybe this should be communication that goes home to the family saying, this is the contract, right? If we're gonna provide this, here is the, your child must be at school at least 90% of the time. So as back to, we don't have a lot of money, what's happening to most districts in California, we're a declining enrollment state. The first place you're gonna cut is where? Central office. That's your infrastructure, right? And it feels good to say, right, those aren't the folks that are in the schools, and they're not, but you lose the ability, right, unless you're leveraging technology to have the folks to do the hard strategy work and analysis work. So I think that's definitely one place. I think when you get into curriculum instruction and assessment, there's a lot. I mean, I play around a lot with Conmigo. With my kids are like, oh my God, Mom, another tool. I'm like, yeah, it's gonna be fun. Let's play around with it. But it's still in its beta stage. But it is incredible the level of error analysis that it can do. Kids doing a problem and it'll spit back out. Which, yeah, if a teacher only had 5 kids all day, there just comes to a time where there's only so many hours in a day, there's only so much money, and that's what we want. We want to have a system so that every kid, right, is getting the instruction in a way that makes sense for them, and they're able to get real-time feedback. The feedback, I think, is where technology, there's so much promise in terms of how much more feedback, how much more frequent a kid can get feedback for them to know, oh, okay, that didn't make sense, or I need to practice this more. And we just don't have the money to have that many adults, because really it would be 4 to 5 adults per every kid, right? If money, right, wasn't the issue. And then even if you had all of those human beings, really making sure you have the money to train them to be able to, when a kid, gives you a certain answer, right, that you're able to give them the feedback, right, so that they can adjust how they're thinking about a problem, or that they get the right kind of practice to accelerate so that they're at proficiency. There's tons of tools, I think, in terms of curriculum and lesson planning and differentiated instruction. I think if we really get out of the fear with this technology, we've never been able to have differentiation at scale, right? Where you have one lesson that's really developed for 20 kids that learn differently. Every kid really should have an individual education plan. So I think those are areas where, again, if we kind of take the fear out of it, I think there's a lot of learning still on the part of systems in terms of how to best use it, but it can really help, I think, us solve some of the problems that we've been struggling to fix at scale.
That's great. And please go
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for taking the microphone. I'm a third-party tutor provider, and we have contracts with major school districts and organizations, and often they put the students in the tutoring program, but then they don't necessarily follow up for making sure those students get to the tutoring program. As a third-party provider, where we've had most success is when we've partnered with districts to get those students with the families into the tutor, they can actually show up. But as administrators, do you have any suggestions, or has this come up within your organizations, or how can third parties work with the family piece to make sure those students come to the tutoring sessions?
I'll start, but then I'll hand off to you around the family piece because we don't engage with the family piece. I will say from the way we operate from the state level and in contracting with the third-party providers who then go into the schools, we are constantly communicating both with the providers and with the schools and districts that are participating. And so when we have good communication with a provider who's saying, look, this school that we are trying to do tutoring with, their students are not showing up or they're not showing up regularly because we're the ones paying the contract. And we're not going to pay you if you're not actually tutoring the students. That's one thing we did learn is making sure that the provider is getting access to the students so that we can pay them as the contract is written. And so then we get on the school and district to say, like, hey, you're going to actually lose this opportunity. If you cannot get the students that you have signed up to there, we're actually going to move the tutoring provider to another school. So one way is that's how we do it is we kind of put the pressure on the school to say, you don't just get access to this. You actually have to show up and help your students show up. And then that would kick in for them the different strategies, which maybe, Kyla, you can speak to the strategies a school would use.
Well, the piece that I was going to underscore, kind of just back to frameworks and what we know needs to be in place, right, for any initiatives, is system structures and processes. And that really is, if you could sum up the role of a system leader, that's what you do. You put in system structures and processes for everything. And I think a lot of times what you're bringing up is a detail. We're so focused on the programmatic pieces, right, which is important, but the systems pieces around communication, right, and really thinking about, okay, at a system, which department is going to be responsible for providing the guidance around what are the system structures and processes that need to be in place in every school? Is it going to be your after-school program coordinator whose responsibility is to coordinate it? Is it assistant principal? Is it the principal? Do you want to leave it to every school to create their own system structures and processes? Or do you want to provide guidance around what needs to be true? Is there training, right? Is there capacity building? And the lack of that, I'm just nodding my head because I can think of 10 schools right now, because this is what we learned with tutoring, that leadership skill of organizational management. If that's not there, it ain't gonna work. It's just not, right? And so my leaders who that's just their jam, that's their strength, or they develop that, I can give them the resources and they got it. But my new leader who's just still learning the job, if I don't have that guidance, if they don't have the folks that can say, hey, you need to make sure you have these things in place, you need trackers, where's your system? We'll give you the tools and templates. It's so much work on that leader on top of everything that they need to do. If they don't have the skill, right, then it starts chipping away at the impact because you have chaos, you have lack of communication that starts to impact the implementation of what you're doing. So I just think that that's such, almost with anything, how a system is attending to the guidance and the support around making sure those systems, structures, and processes are in place. If you think about like a business, you're in startup mode in your first 2 years of implementing, right? If it's not there, there's going to be bumps along the road because everyone within the school is trying to get adjusted to this new system. When you get into year 3 and 4, then you're refining. But if no one's paying attention to it and it's just the money, it's just the program, you're bound to have, all your kids aren't going to get served, right? Because the infrastructure just isn't there.
We have 1 minute left, so we have time for one last question.
I just want to double down on your comment, Kyla.
Yes, ma'am.
First, I'm Dr. Nye, Chief of Curriculum and Instruction, School District of Philadelphia. This concept of partnership and how systems can't do it alone, partners can't do it alone. What are some of those key levers that you see with good partnership, right? Because I love the concept of agitating or keeping districts on their toes, right? But what are some of those key levers that you see makes a great partnership on behalf of district as well as partner? I think that'll be helpful for us to understand across this room, because I love that idea that there's someone that may not be looking at the problem in the same ways that you're looking at it to provide deeper insight. But what are some of those key elements?
That's a great question. And maybe we could have each of you share in 30 seconds or so what you think. Complex question, short time.
I think it's really coming at it from it should be a healthy relationship where you are able to have sometimes challenging conversations, but that are real and that are grounded in the actual issues, and also that you have a partnership where you have a shared commitment and a shared vision for what you want. And so then you can have those hard conversations because you have a shared goal that you're working together. If you come across partners who don't have that shared commitment or shared goal, then it's not going to work. And you're not going to be able to have those hard conversations or result in what you want. I think that's one thing why we rely so heavily on just, sometimes maybe overly so, but the data collection. Because the data reveal things that you may not have seen before. And then in sharing those data with a partner, then you have, it's that power of seeing things that you may not have seen and helping someone see your blind spots and vice versa. And then if you have that shared goal, how do you leverage each other's resources and services in ways that make sense to serve the students?
I think to add to that, a level of humility and vulnerability on both sides. I'm a big believer breaking bread with people, right? So before we even get to the business, I want to know who you are as a person, as the CEO of X, Y, and Z organization. So even before we got to the partnership with Eat, Learn, Play, they came and met with my team, and we just tried to figure out, is there enough alignment and shared vision? I talked about, here was our strategic plan. One of our pillars is early literacy, right? And so that they could say, I could hear from them, oh, here's our vision with Eat, Learn, Play. Here's what we're trying to do. This was like 6 years ago, right? So, you don't get married after you just go through one date, right? So I think a lot of times you just jumping into, I've said no now to a lot of money, because all money ain't good money. All partners may not be the right fit. And then, like anything else, again, back to system structures and processes, having a regular meeting cadence where we're checking in. Sometimes it's just 15 minutes, their CEO and myself, how we're doing, how the partnership is going. Because without that relational trust, people aren't going to bring up hard issues. They'll tell everybody, but maybe you'll see it on social media or you'll hear about it from somewhere else. But it takes a minute to develop enough relational trust for people to say, on the system side, I know you guys want to try to do that in a year, but we're a bureaucracy. That's just not going to be possible. I found my team was like, well, we can't say no to the Currys. I was like, yes, you can, but they're going to lose some money. And so just those skills of how do you get in a space, and if they're your partner, but you have to say, hey, yeah, that sounds like we could do it in a year, but let me walk you through ed code, let me walk you through our labor, let me walk you through all these things. We need more time. So that relational trust, and I think it's the responsibility of the CEO, again, to have that system where there's regular times to meet, where you're setting the expectation on both sides, right, around when problems happen, speak up. So I think that's the human system piece that needs to be parallel or complement all the technical pieces as well.
And thank you so much to Kyla and Erin. This has really been an incredible panel. And we've talked about, this is complex work and it does evolve, but, some really great things here talking about partnerships, about data, and about really, the communities that we're working in. And so thank you both so much for your insights. And with that, we'll conclude our panel. So please give them a round of applause.